Hi, welcome to Unit 2. In Unit 2, what we're focused on is better understanding what we mean when we say culture and to begin to understand how much cultures can vary from one place to another and from one group to another. So when thinking about culture, one of the first things that I often have students do is I have them think about as if they were turning the pages of a magazine. So let's all pretend that we've got in front of us a Good Housekeeping or Woman's Day or People magazine, some kind of typical magazine for North American culture. You're turning the pages of the magazine and you come upon a full page ad for an insurance company. So imagine that on that page there's a picture of a family in front of the place that they live. What do you see? So take a moment and think about it. So in the past, when I've done this exercise with people right in front of me, not just students on Canvas who can't talk back, usually what people say is they say that they see 4 people. They see a mom, a dad, a son, and a daughter. They see them in front of a 2-story house. They see a picket fence. They often see a dog. And sometimes they talk about seeing a car in the driveway. So when you think about that image, and when you think about how interesting it is that for about 11 years, I've been doing the same kind of experiment with students, and they almost always come up with the same example of what they see, that same image. What is that? That is what we call culture with a big C. And that means culture that's a big image that tries to describe an entire people, that tries to describe how an entire culture works. But of course, we know that when something's held up as the ideal, that's not how reality plays out for most of us. So just for a moment, I want you to think about your own family in front of the home that you grew up in. So like I mentioned, in the past, I normally do this exercise with students who can talk back, and when they have talked back, what they've said is that there weren't 4 people in their family. Maybe there was a mom but not a dad. Mom and dad lived separately. There wasn't any dog, maybe 2 cats. They didn't live in a 2-story home. Maybe they lived in an apartment. There wasn't any car. Hardly anyone had a picket fence. Now, isn't that interesting? What we think of, the image in our minds, is a picket fence, and yet very few of us actually had that. So what that means is that the way that our individual lives play out is not the image. It's not what describes the general population usually. There's usually quite a difference. So when we think about our individual families in front of our individual homes, that's more like what I'm talking about here, culture with a little c. So we've got culture with a big C. It's the big image. It's broad brushstrokes attempting to describe an entire people, an entire way of being. Culture with a little c, it's the reality, how things really play out. Now, part of that reality is thinking about the concept that people opt in or opt out of different aspects of culture. And I can give you an example from my own background. So you know from Unit 1 in this course that I grew up on a farm. I grew up in the Midwest in Indiana. I grew up on the very farm that my father was born on, and that I have German American heritage. There's other things too, but there's definitely German American heritage. So here's an example of one way that I opt into the culture that I was raised in. In my community, in my family, in my own personal birth family, it was seen as a way to show love and respect for your home and love and respect for your family by keeping the house very, very clean. Now, I'm not guaranteeing you if you came to my house, you'd find it perfectly clean, but I try my best. That is something that I have taken in. I've taken in that value, that one way to show love for your family, love for your home, is to take really good care of it in terms of keeping it clean. So that's an example of probably very much a German-American heritage culture piece that I've opted into. So that's a way that my own personal culture does match up probably with the German-American culture. So that's a way, that culture with a big C, I do match up with that a little bit. Now there's another aspect of the culture I was raised in that I opt out of. So I was raised on a farm, I was raised in a farming community, and it is through sheer physical hard work that people bring the crops in, build barns, take care of their animals, move animals from pasture to pasture. And so physical labor is seen as very important and the most significant kind of work. And intellectual labor, thinking, not so much. Of course, what did I choose for a profession? I'm a professor, I'm a researcher, I'm a writer, and I love it. And so very much I've bought into the idea that intellectual labor is very important work, and it's very valuable work. And so this is a way that I've opted out of my home culture and my community culture. It's not that what I do isn't valued, but it's not probably valued nearly as much as physical labor where I'm from. So that's a little example from my own personal anecdote of how you can opt in or opt out of culture. And that helps us get a little bit deeper understanding of the difference between culture with a big C, those big brush strokes, culture with a little c, how it really plays out for individuals in terms of opting in or opting out of different parts of culture. So when I'm out, especially with K through 12 teachers, often what I hear is that they are very anxious to understand the cultural backgrounds that their students are coming from, especially at the beginning when they're just beginning to teach students from a new cultural background that they don't know very much about. And often I feel like what they're doing is they're asking me for, what's the answers? I want the answer key. And if you think about it, what they're really asking for is they're asking for information about culture with a big C. Now, I can often help them with a few of the concepts, but I bet right now you can see what the problem is. That the students who are coming to them, who are sitting down in their classes ready to learn, they have their own personal culture. They've already opted in, opted out of some of the big cultural pieces. And it may be that their family is quite different than the majority culture that they're originally from. And so we really need to focus on the individual students and to understand their own experiences and to keep in mind every one of us opts in and opts out of different cultural pieces. Now, another set of terms that I need you to know for this unit is the difference between shallow culture and deep culture. And these might be new terms for you, but I think you'll recognize the concept. Shallow culture are the aspects of culture that are easy to see, and they're easy to depict. They're easy to symbolize. And deep culture, it's difficult to express, describe, it's more complicated. And here's an example. Sometimes I go into teachers' classrooms when we're talking about culture, and they will believe that they are indicating to students that they are very open to learning about different cultures. And the way that they are doing this is by having lots of environmental items up on the walls. For example, they might have kimonos hanging up, they might have decorations from different cultures, pictures of traditional foods, pictures of traditional houses, images from holidays around the world, that kind of thing. And so I'm sure it's engaging and exciting, and it creates a wonderful environment for students, but actually it's only inviting in students' shallow culture. So the easiest part to recognize. And of course, as we just talked about, it's very likely that even students from one of those cultures might not even opt into those kinds of aspects, and so their own personal culture might be very different. So if shallow culture doesn't matter, what does matter? Deep culture. Deep culture is where our focus needs to be as teachers. What is deep culture? Deep culture is how you think about time, how you think about showing respect to other people, how you think about your responsibility as a family member, your responsibility as a parent or as a student, your responsibility as a teacher. It's the kinds of things that are so important to us that we may never have put them into words before. It's almost like the air we breathe. We just don't think about it so much. We don't think about it until there's some kind of clash. And often when we think that there's a personality clash, it's actually an intercultural clash. We've come to a place where cultural assumptions don't quite match up. And we're going to take a look in this unit, we're going to take a look at several different ways that those clashes might happen. But before I move on to tell you what's coming next, I wanted to make sure that you're familiar with this concept, the concept of the iceberg. And if you did a Google search, the cultural iceberg or the iceberg concept, I'm sure it will come up, and there's lots of different versions of it. But here's essentially what I need you to know. That when we think about an iceberg, what we think about is the fact that sticking up above the water is just a little bit, right? We say the tip of the iceberg, right? And that thing that's easily seen above the water, that's consistently seen, that is shallow culture. And that's the piece that teachers most easily see, but it's not the pieces that really matter for the classroom, for planning instruction, for communicating with parents, for thinking how to be polite with others. That's not what matters. What we need to be paying attention to, of course, is the deeper part of that iceberg, the lower part, and that's where what really matters comes up. So where we're going next in the unit, I want you to get a pretty good sense of how cultures can vary in some pretty essential ways in terms of touch, how close we stand to each other, eye contact, how we think about time, that kind of thing. But there's another thing too, is that we don't think about culture at this deep level. We feel it. I remember when I was backpacking, when I was a young person after college, and I was backpacking, and I traveled through 11 different countries in Europe, and I remember the first time that I was standing in line at a bank, and the person behind me was standing right behind me, and it wasn't a personal thing. It wasn't about me being harassed by the person behind me, because when I looked at all the people in front of me and all the people behind, they were all that close. Everyone's front was touching someone's back, except my front was not touching the person in front of me. I made sure to have a space. And the thing is that I didn't intellectually think about that. I felt it. My pulse was running fast, I felt overheated, and I truly felt very stressed and tense because of a way that my kind of sense of cultural space was not playing out as I'd expected. And so to give you a sense of this, the first thing I want you to do after you watch this video is I want you to watch an excerpt from Zootopia. If you're a parent or you have nieces or nephews, you might have taken a child or seen this with a child. It's a fun little movie about a city in which there's animals from all different species sharing the space of the city. And the key piece, you probably already guessed that if you've seen it, of what I want you to watch, is I want you to watch what happens when the main character goes into the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and the main character is a rabbit, and all the people working, all the employees in the DMV are sloths. And so it's a really fun way to explore time and how differently people experience time. But of course, what I really want you to pay attention to is how the hare feels, how the rabbit feels about that. So just keep in mind that culture is not thought about, culture is felt. And so that really puts the onus on us as teachers to get a sense of how our students might be coming from different assumptions than we have in our own culture, and for us to be really sensitive to and ready to make some changes if needed. So after you watch the Zootopia, then I would like you to listen to an interview I did with Brigitte Gadebeku. She came as an asylee from the country of Togo in West Africa, and Brigitte is the person that first helped me at a really deep level understand how differently people think about time. So listen to what she has to say about that. After that, there are some articles to read, very brief. There's a video to watch. It's about how people think about time differently, touch differently, eye contact, that sort of thing. And then meet me in the discussion.